When I went to paediatric doctors, I noticed huge differences in public transport precautions. You can't enter the door by the driver, and the first few seats are roped off. It was in a very touristic city, and it was completely dead. Like some kind of zombie apocalypse or something completely crazy. Use your head. Think of other people. Check up on family and friends. What I'm seeing in this whole situation is stay in touch with family and friends. Check up on the elderly.
In general, right now, I'm a lot less stressed out than I was last week. I think that might have to do with just because the weather's quite nice and I've still got food in my fridge. Last week I was quite stressed out because I got a text from my boss saying that we would have to close down for the foreseeable future. And when I asked what the plan was in terms of payment and income, he didn't have an answer. So that had me incredibly stressed out. I immediately started applying for other jobs. Unfortunately, in my line of work, I knew this before I started applying, I knew that no one would be hiring. Essentially, every restaurant and catering business is shut down for the foreseeable future. Quite rightly so, I think. But at the time, it doesn't really reassure you that you can pay your rent and buy food and making sure you're okay. But up to last Friday, I think, is when Rishi Sunak made the announcement that the state would guarantee up to 80% of people's incomes if their employment was put on hold. So that kind of reassured me until a few days ago. However, I'm starting to get a little bit worried now because since that announcement was made, there's been no sort of follow-up in terms of how it's going to be actually implemented. As of now, things are fine. I've got money in the bank and food in the fridge. Next week might be a problem if there's been no sort of follow-up on what was said last week. The things that have been stressing me out the most have been mainly my income, work, paying the rent, those sorts of things, rather than getting sick itself. I'm scared of what's going to happen because of coronavirus, not because of coronavirus itself.
Okay, from my perspective, I'm fine. Struggling a little bit because of work responsibilities and being remote from that. Would like to go out if I could, but kind of accepting the situation. Unfortunate, because it could be much worse. So when it was first discovered, that was December last year or early this year. Indifferent, really, because it was like, I'm sure it was like that for everyone else. So when the news broke that it arrived in the UK, that was after it had affected so many other much closer geographical regions, including European locations. So it felt like at that time there could be some definite impact for us here at that time.
I feel restless. I feel overwhelmed with everything that's going on, but trying not to be at the same time. I feel that the government, as it stands now, have let us down. We are 3 weeks behind other nations. Our family in Ireland have been isolating for the last month, and there's a lot of protocols that have been put in place a lot earlier. In the space of the last week, I've lost about 8 jobs. That's day jobs and acting jobs. They've either been cancelled or postponed until further notice, and we just don't know when they're likely to start up again. So I'm getting over that and trying to adjust to this new weird normal that we now have.
In fact, I think actually for me, I was at my most worried, anxious before we went into lockdown, because nobody seemed to care. In fact, me and my boyfriend, we were on holiday, maybe in this country, maybe 3 days before we went into lockdown, and I was just so on edge the whole time. I mean, it was great, but just nobody seemed to care, and all the restaurants were packed, and I just felt wrong being there, knowing that the rest of the world, like I have friends in Italy and Spain and America, and knowing that they were all in lockdown and the rules that they had to abide by, and compared to the rules that we have to abide by, I just thought it was ridiculous that some people were complaining about it, because, we had it relatively easy in comparison to a lot of other countries in terms of their lockdown. And so I would say, my most kind of anxiety was before lockdown and trying to persuade my older relatives that this is serious, and they just didn't seem to care. And in fact, I think now I'm a little bit agoraphobic about going back out there into the real world. But I'm grateful for everything that we have achieved during lockdown. Not that we needed to do anything, or not that anything was expected of us, obviously, but I will look back at this time and think I made the most of it.